Hey everybody, Guilty here. It's finally done. After talking about it for weeks, over a month here and in the open FF7R server, I finally got together enough good quality footage to assemble an easier to digest visual tutorial for importing your own weapon mods into Final Fantasy VII Remake using 3D Magoto. I say easier to digest because the last time I tried to demonstrate this process, it was on a live stream and that shit went on for like an hour and a half. So we're gonna try to keep this condensed as best as possible. Excuse me, I'm gonna keep some of those for later. First, there are some prerequisites, and I'm not going to cover them too deeply because the written instructions for how and where to put the prereq mods, they're good enough on their own. So you're gonna need the 3D Magoto Final Fantasy VII base mod and the Final Fantasy VII hook mod, both acquired through Nexus. Links are in the description, but 3DM is how we will extract and inject the data to make our mod possible, and the hook can enable and disable some settings to also facilitate the mod. The base mod must be extracted to FF7 Remake Intergrade /end/binaries/win64, the same folder that houses the remake_exe. And the engine INI from the hook mod must be extracted to Documents, My Games, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Saved, Config, Windows No Editor. Chances are you'll have to make the Windows No Editor folder for yourself. So if it's not there, make it. Now this is enough for those who just want to use other people's weapon mods. And even that statement is irrelevant now that the pack method has sort of been ironed out. But if you're watching this, chances are you want more than that. You don't want to use other people's mods, you want to create your own. That's going to require a couple more programs. Blender or some 3D modeling program, Unreal Engine, the FF7R Mesh Importer. Nice, Dietrich just bought Elden Ring. Good luck. Blender is free, and Unreal Engine can be downloaded through Epic Games, which just so happens to be how you can get FF7R in the first place. Open the Epic Games launcher, and at the left side, select Unreal Engine. Select Library, and you may see the latest version there. Currently, it's 4.27.2. Well, we need the same version used to develop Remake, a 4.18. Select the black and yellow plus button next to engine versions to generate an additional slot to hold an additional UE version. For the drop-down arrow next to the version number, select 4.18.3 and install. Might take a bit, just a heads up. And for workflow, once installed, click the black and yellow drop-down arrow next to launch and set 4.18 as your current version. And that's if you don't use Unreal Engine for anything else, like me. If that was step 0, then here is step 1, open the game. If you installed 3DM correctly, orange text will appear in the lower left to remind you to press F1 for help. And that's a good sign. That means 3DM hooked correctly into the game. So load whatever save file you must to bring the weapon you want to replace on screen. You're going to need to see it to really get started. Once you're in a game, press numpad 0 to bring up 3DM's interface. Next, we're going to use 3DM to cycle through everything rendered on screen to find what is called the index buffer hash that represents our weapon. In the example on screen, we're going to replace Aerith's Arcane Scepter. Now, if you're not in an enclosed battle space such as this one, you want to take your character to a corner where as little as possible could be visible. The fewer objects rendered, the better. And once you're in a good spot, press 8 on the numpad to begin index buffer hunting. You should see in the upper part of your screen VS, PS, CS, GS, and now IB. Look at IB to see how many objects total are rendered. If the number is ridiculously high, move your character or your camera to further reduce the objects on screen and press numpad plus to more or less flash 3DM. Press 8 again to start hunting, and if the number is lower or more manageable, well, you can move on. Press numpad 8 to begin scrolling through the index buffers. When you select or land on an IB, that object will by default disappear, identifying your rendered target for you. Continue to press or hold numpad 8 until the weapon you want to replace vanishes. Double check that you found what you wanted, that the item you want to replace disappears when you hit a certain IB, then settle on that IB and press numpad 9 to copy it to your clipboard. I would open a notepad document too and paste this number in there. You're going to need it later. The following step, what we'll call 1.5, has only been necessary to me when wanting to also mod the weapon's materia, which has become more common as I've gotten more comfortable with this process. Make sure weapon dumps are enabled via right shift F4, and make sure that costume dumps are disabled with F4. Press F8 to perform a frame analysis dump. 3DM will grab all of those rendered targets and dump their buffer and shader data, as well as their textures, into a folder in the same location as your 3DM files. Locate that folder, which is going to be in the same spot as your underscore.exe, and search in it for the IB of the weapon you recorded. You should find a half dozen files with that IB, some of them .txt and the others .buf, BUF. All of them starting with an object number in the scheme of 000XXX. If you want to mod materia, search for the two adjacent object numbers such as 000488 and 000489. More often than not, the first object is the weapon and the second is the materia. Open the IB notepad document for the first object, so in my example 488, and verify the first index. It will probably say 0, and that's what is expected of the weapon. The next object should have a different first index, such as 24600. Again, if you want to mod materia, document this information. Step 2 is where our modded asset and 3D modeling software is introduced. Since I use Blender, that's the software I'm going to be referencing. Open or import the model you want to put in FF7R. For your desired model to work in-game, pay attention to these special rules regarding your model. Your model must be one whole mesh, no separate objects. Your model must have at least one vertex group assigned to it with a weight of 1. Your entire model must use one texture image. Your model must have at least one UV map assigned, and your model must be assigned to only one material. Now, some of these rules will undoubtedly flex or outright change as more people experiment and find different ways to mod their stuff into the game. For instance, the script I'm reading off of right now, I had written your model must have one vertex group, but for the Aerith Arcane Scepter mod that we're doing, that weapon came with 9 vertex groups. I kept them all in, and spoiler alert, it still worked out. So yeah, I'm still learning new things, and the rest of the community probably will as well. But I would still keep those rules in the back of my mind. As you can see in the scene collection taskbar in the upper right, the entire model is one whole object when selected. No parts or pieces are separated. It's all joined into one whole mesh. So, step 2.1, we need to add it to a vertex group. For Cloud Swords, there's only one vertex group attached to that weapon. So to add it, select the object, click the green Object Data Properties button, and click the plus sign to create a vertex group. With it highlighted, change to edit mode. Your model should change to a wireframe appearance, and under the vertex groups box, you should see a few more buttons and the weight slider. Select your entire model again by pressing A with your cursor in the main working area, then verify weight is set to 1.0 and click assign. To verify, change from edit mode to weight paint mode. Your model should be completely red. For step 2.2, our entire model must be assigned to one capital M material. Most likely, if your model is high poly, it will use multiple textures and therefore use a few materials, which are listed in the index. We're going to need to cut that down to 1, but we can use those now to help us with another task, mapping to our mesh their corresponding texture image. You'll have to combine your diffuse textures into one. You can use Photoshop or something like that to facilitate that kind of task. In the red tab with the sphere, Material Properties, click the minus until you have one material listed. There shouldn't be any effect to your model's appearance. Go up to the Object Data Properties tab to verify your vertex groups and check to see which UV loop layer is active, has the white camera icon next to it. In my experience, you're going to need multiple UV loop layers, at least 3. When I import Final Fantasy VII Remake PSKs into Blender, they all populate with at least 3 UV loop layers. So make those for yourself if you don't already have them. And if you're doing a mod using this method, the process that I'm demonstrating here, you don't need to rename them anything. There just needs to be 3 spots for UVs. Hopefully all the texture mapping you performed earlier was recorded under one active loop layer. So if you haven't messed with them yet, all of your changes should be untouched. Step 2.3 is to orient and align our model. If you've dabbled with uModel in Blender before, then you may already have the PSK Blender import script and can import the PSK of the weapon you're replacing to see its default positioning. Aerith's Arcane Scepter is actually lined up along the x-axis. If the size of the original model is larger than your mod, you can adjust the scale of select vertices or scale the axes by different proportions to try to match. I know I touched briefly on materia earlier, but I'm going to save that for a smaller another separate tutorial to kind of attach to this one because this one's already going to be long enough as it is. That's what she said. Step 2.4 is the way we export our model for use in Unreal Engine. So let's double check your model first. One mesh, one material, vertex groups match the number of vertex groups you had initially, and at least 3 UV maps. Also, take this time to delete the camera and the light source if you haven't already. The only object listed should be your model. If that all checks out, go to File, Export, FBX. Uncheck Bake Animation, hit the drop-down arrow for armature, and uncheck Add Leaf Bones. Click the drop-down for geometry and check Tangent Space. Also, change smoothing from normals only to face. Click Export, and hopefully we're done with Blender now. Next is Unreal Engine, where we will import our model and cook what amounts to a custom game. That's right, you're about to become a game developer. I will try to host my UE project file so you can hopefully skip past the setup portion. I've done this enough times though to be able to tell you with certainty what needs to be done. So if the sharing of the project file doesn't work out, then I can add some notes regarding how to set up your own UE project file. In the content browser at the bottom, click Import and find your model. Upon import, you'll be given a list of import options. Check Skeletal Mesh at the top, and if there's already a skeleton loaded, click the yellow arrow to clear it out. I've made it a habit to clear out all my items except for the map after every import. So every following import does not attach itself to some random skeleton left behind from an earlier mod. With our weapon in the content browser, click and drag it onto the map. That's the end of my script. Oh shit. Okay, where was I? With our weapon in the content browser, click and drag it into the level. You're done. Oh wow, okay, sweet. Well, you still have to package your game, but then you'll be done. Go to File, Package Project, Windows, 64-bit. The window that pops open should be in your UE project folder. In my case, one step inside my FF7R mods project. Select folder and shake and bake. Oh, step 3 was so short, I forgot to say it was step 3. So that was step 3. Now on to step 4, the FF7R mesh importer. Credits given on the importer's GitHub, but I'm going to say thanks anyway to Narknon, Terry XXX, Jordan Tucker, Juju B, and Matyalatte. And fuck it, Sam too. Open the mesh importer GUI and change the mode to UE 4.18 dump/validate. Select the dump buffers radio button, then click the ellipsis next to input.uexp file. We're going to inject the UE viewer package of our cooked model into the importer. To find it, go into your root UE project folder in Documents, Unreal Projects, same folder you selected earlier when cooking your game. Click into Windows No Editor, your UE project folder, click Content, then find the UEXP that correlates to your model. This is where still having Unreal Engine open can benefit you. In the example on screen, there are 5 UEXPs with the same timestamp, one for every item that was in my content browser. So in addition to the model, there's going to be a UEXP for the map, the physics, the skeleton, and the material. Match the name of your model in the content browser to the UEXP in the content folder and hit open. Specify your output destination, then dump buffers. For step 4.1, let's grab those buffers. Go to the destination you specified as your output, and you should find a log.json and 4 buff files. We're going to copy some of these into the mod folder that we dragged next to the _exe with the FF7R base mod way back in step 0. Whatever the fuck. Select everything in your output destination folder except IB2 and copy paste those 4 files to FF7 Remake Intergrade and binaries Win64 mods. What you are grabbing are 2 vertex buffer objects, which store the vertex data of your model, and the index buffer, which acts as a lookup table containing the indices of all your model's lines and triangles. We need the log to help specify the stride, or the size and bytes of the data elements in your vertex buffers. An incorrect stride will incorrectly render your model, stretching it or compressing it into a mess of polygons. Step 5 is where all of the aforementioned buffer and vertex data is utilized in writing your mod's INI or configuration file. I will host a couple examples in my Google Drive, but if you want to write it out yourself, more power to you. Too long didn't read? The INI is the script 3DM will read and execute, and will direct the base mod to whatever buffers and texture maps that you specify. It will only know what you tell it. So if you enter something incorrectly, either 3DM will display a warning upon first opening the game or pressing F10 that something's wrong, or your model will render just incorrectly. If you do not want an explanation on how to write an INI and what the different functions and strings are for the most part doing, skip ahead to the time displayed on screen, or skip to the next chapter using YouTube's embedded timestamps. So the entire operation here is a texture override, and I'm choosing to specify that it's for Aerith's rod. Under that is where we need the index buffer hash that we copied from the game way back in step 1. And under that, we are telling the INI, which will tell the game, how to find the new index buffer and vertex buffers associated with our mod. Without these, the game won't know what triangles to draw, and our model won't render. These strings state that the new VB0, VB2, and IB are referenced at their corresponding resource costume replace rod strings. Jumping ahead some to stick with the buffers, we will specify further in the INI which buff files their respective replace rod strings are meant to retrieve. Enter the corresponding buff's file name at filename equals. We will now reference the log.json to determine each vertex buffer's stride. It won't take long to find it. Open the JSON and locate VB0 and VB2. In my experience, more often than not, VB0 will have a stride of 24, 28, or 32, and VB2 will almost always have a stride of 8. Whatever they are, copy the buffer's stride from the log to the corresponding stride equals in the INI. And although the log doesn't specify the texture format, the IB will almost always be R16_UINT. Mustache is really itching my nose. Finally, we need to dictate the textures we want mapped to our model. If you remember, when we performed our frame analysis dump, we were browsing a folder that contained text files, buff files, and texture images. The texture images all had a common file name structure, starting with that 000XXX object number, and was followed with a PS-T. Every object I've dumped, in my experience, has had at least 3 PS-Ts. Materia usually has 3, and weapons and other meshes use 4. And every object's PST1 was the same type of texture map, a normal map. Every PST2 has been a color map, every PST3 has been a metal roughness map, and every PST4 has been an ambient occlusion map. So, in our INI file, we're going to specify which of those PSTs will be replaced with our own normal, color, metallic, and AO maps. To do that, we will link the PST1, 2, 3, and 4 the game is expecting to read to the resource replace function. Each map will need its own resource replace, which is why you see resource replace rod N, C, M, and O. To tell the INI what texture to retrieve when performing a resource replace, we must enter the exact file name, including file extension. In the example on screen, I am telling the INI to retrieve rod_n.dds when implementing the resource replace rod N function. The only other time that function is called is when I'm telling the INI to address that DDS to the game's PST1. Well, which PST1, you may be asking? Well, the PST1 of the index buffer hash we specified in the beginning. In the end, our INI should be able to direct 3D Magoto to the buffers and texture maps of our modded asset. Every line beginning with a semicolon is commented out, so you can use that to troubleshoot if your mod doesn't render as intended. Speaking of, our final step is execution. Pack all of your buffs, textures, and the INI into its own folder inside Win64/mods. Then launch FF7 Remake. If an error appears with a sound cue as the game opens, read it and go troubleshooting from there. Maybe you wrote DDS instead of ping, or a string is accidentally commented out. When everything appears green and good to go upon load or pressing F10, do what you must to get the asset you are replacing on screen so you can verify your work. If you're fortunate, the maps you are feeding the game are applying to your custom mesh as intended. If not, well, that is why I mentioned the semicolon earlier. You can try commenting out one map at a time to see the effect of its absence in-game, then determine if you need to procure an entirely new map or maybe feed a different type of map than what the game engine is expecting. Unreal Engine will always process PST1 as a normal, PST2 as a color, PST3 as a metal roughness map, and PST4 as an AO map. For instance, a specular map can sometimes work great for both metallic and ambient occlusion. Just depends on what kind of maps you're working with. It's also really helpful to have the original texture maps used with the model. For instance, I've modded in Kingdom Hearts and Ninja Gaiden weapons, and their latest releases, such as Kingdom Hearts 3 and Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, well, they have more maps at a higher resolution than their earlier entries, like Kingdom Hearts Final Mix or Ninja Gaiden Black. A good map goes a long way. And that's the end of it. It feels weird finally having finished this. It almost feels like I'm missing something, but I'm pretty sure that's everything. Nope, I spoke too soon. We're not done with this yet. Assuming you want to learn how to embed materia into your custom meshes. That's actually a really simple process. That shouldn't take that long to do. If I am missing something, let me know in the comment section, and maybe in the next day or two, I'll record or stream me making another mod, just the process start to finish, and then you can follow along and we can determine then if there's something I missed or if there's something that I should have emphasized, but I didn't. All right, everybody, that wraps it for me. Hopefully I put all the right tools in your hands with the right guidance, because I'm excited to see what you might come up with. And hey, maybe in a couple weeks I can figure out how to do what other people in the community are doing. Importing custom costumes. I mean, it'd be cool to put reuse scarf on Cloud, for instance. Whatever. That's gonna do it for me. I'm tired, and I'm gonna go see the Batman. So take it easy, have fun, like, subscribe, and go outside. I think we're done.